we'll have that person call each and every one of you and arrange a meeting to see where you are with your project, to see what kind of help they can give you. So plan to stay in touch. By the end of October, we'd like to bring everybody back together to sort of, we hope, celebrate the completion of your projects. And then in November, we're planning a social event where we're going to have a big hoo-ha for you. And invite some people from the state and from the county and from the city who are very, very interested in the work that you're doing and really, really appreciate all of the time that you've put in. So we'll be having a social event. So stay tuned for that. But the first thing we want to do, we have such a treat for you, and since Deirdre did the whole dang thing, I'll let her. Ta-da!
Those are nice ones.
They're really nice and they're embroidered, and I hope you guys like them and will wear them, you know, when you do volunteer things or whatever. So in the box I have everyone's name on them, so we can pick them up on your way out the door or something. If you need a different size, there's some extras. So. Yay!
And we're putting together business cards for you with the Water Stewards logo on. So we're going to ask you by the end of the evening to fancy. We're going to ask you to fill out your contact information so that we have consistent information on the card. And then we'll print up business cards for you with the Water Stewards logo so you can hand them out at your outreach campaign so people can get a hold of you as a steward. Yes?
Would you say a little bit about what kind of feedback we're going to get on the proposals we submitted?
Yes.
And you know what the timeline is and whatever.
I've just gotten some of them in today in the last day or so. So by Monday, I'll go through all of those proposals and give you specific feedback on what I'm seeing. Ask you questions or ask for clarifications. But you have to assume that if you're doing some sort of stormwater management project that meets the criteria for the cost share at Minnehaha Creek, you're good to go. I don't care what the project is that you put in, as long as it meets Minnehaha Creek Watershed District's cost share requirements. But I'll give you feedback on the proposal. I'll give you feedback, especially on the outreach campaign, and just sort of ask you all of the questions that I see reading through it. Okay?
Yeah, I'm just, because to answer this question, what else do I need?
Right.
Or we need, you know, it's a little bit dependent on what you say.
Right. So
You say, this is crap, you don't start over, then
I'm not going
you
to
might
say
need
that.
something different.
I'm not going to say that. So put down what you know at this point. I'll send you feedback by Monday. And if what you need next changes, then we'll take that into consideration. Thank you for that. Question?
Are you going to talk tonight, or are you going to do it by email about the additional funding that we will have access to?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I know now. We have been recommended for approval for this funding, but we have not been approved for approval by the approvers who will give us approval. That will happen in August, mid-August. So within the next 3 weeks, I anticipate getting approval, official approval. I think it's almost certain we'll get it based on the conversations I've had. But until we know, I can't tell you. What I can tell you is if it is approved, you'll have an additional $800 for your installation project and $400 for your outreach campaign. Okay?
Cool. So the 800 would be like offset what our responsibility is.
Correct. It would be to offset the 50% of the project that Minnehaha Creek does not cover. And then up to $400 for printed materials or food if you want to have an event or
Yeah.
whatever else it is.
So National Night Out is next Tuesday, which is the beginning of our outreach.
Yes.
So can we, if we keep receipts from things that we print out for that,
Yes.
will it work retroactively?
I'll make sure it does.
Okay.
Keep every single receipt. I don't care if it's for a nickel. Keep it. Okay? Just make a file. Keep every single receipt that for all the expenses you incur for these projects, for both the installation and the outreach campaign. All right?
And the outreach is the other project you're talking about, or the outreach for
The behavior change.
pardon me?
Behavior change.
Behavior change,
Yeah, so you've got an installation piece and a behavior change piece.
But on the other funding we have, it's only on the installation, right?
Yes, Minnehaha Creek will provide 50% up to $2,500 on your installation, and then we may have an additional $800 to bridge the gap. So that's the installation. For the outreach campaign, you'll have about $400 for materials or things like that.
And that would be something that we apply to the cost share, or no?
Nope, that's separate
It's a
through.
different pot.
Yep, separate through the Freshwater Society.
Go over any dates or?
No, I haven't yet. All right. Any other questions? Oh, you didn't see. Pull those shirts out again. Some of you came late. This was our big treat. Look. So you'll have those when you walk out the door tonight.
Oh, that's exciting.
I know.
Yay.
I know. Deirdre did that. Yay.
Can we brainstorm for a few minutes about how we might be benefiting from and using this individual who's going to start September 1?
Yes.
Like both parts?
Can I have couple more minutes?
Oh, yeah, we're not even quarter.
Both parts, installation and outreach? I
Correct.
take it,
Yes.
Everything we do.
Yes. So if you need help running errands, if you need help picking up materials, if you need help digging the hole, if you need help putting the plants in, if you need help flyering a neighborhood, if you need help doing surveys, this person's job, full-time job, is to help you get these projects done.
Does the person come in with some knowledge of resources related to things we're going to do? For instance, will they know more than Sheila and I do about potential handouts to use at our events and so forth? Or
No, but I do.
Yeah, so, and you'll be supervising this person? Okay.
Yeah. So if this person doesn't know, they'll come to me and I'll help.
Okay.
On that note, we have a table full of resources behind you on rain gardens, lazy landscaping, invasive species, blah, 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 blah. There's just a bunch of stuff. So if you're doing a national night out on Tuesday, grab a stack of stuff. There's one really nice trifold pamphlet on 10 things you can do to reduce urban runoff. It's just the top 10 lists that watershed districts have put together.
So is this person, do they have an interest in water management? Do they have a background in
That's a
it,
good
or-
question. This person comes through the Green Corps program, which is a corps within the National AmeriCorps program. They're being interviewed and hired by the PCA, specifically in the Green Infrastructure program. So the people who will apply for that program have an interest or a background or both in green infrastructure. So they will come in having self-selected to join that corps. There's a reading corps, there's a math corps, there's a this corps and a that corps. This is a green corps. So these folks have self-selected to become part of an environmentally focused corps, and they're applying for the green infrastructure strand. So they'll be very, very specialized. And in our application for the Green Corps member, I wrote down a set of criteria that I wanted to see in this person. And that included content knowledge of social media, good communication skills, teamwork, all of those kinds of things. So that's hopefully the kind of person we'll get. Other questions? These are the question-askingest people I've ever met.
Fantastic.
Other questions before we begin? All right. They will come up later. So now I want to introduce a very dear colleague of mine, April Rust. She's with the DNR. She's formerly the statewide coordinator for the Project WET program, which is Water Education for Teachers. So April's been working as a teacher with teachers for many, many years. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's session. One of your colleagues in this room called her the invasive person. So I'm going to. That's your new title.
It's a lot easier than actually if you look at my card now. I just got them. They had to like chop it to fit on the card.
So we're just going to call her the invasive person, but we're going to take a little bit of a detour tonight and talk about aquatic invasive species as an influence on the total health of an ecosystem. So, April.
Hi, Peggy. Hello. I don't like doing a lot of screen time, but we are going to do a little. I'm going to show you the first maybe 5 minutes of a nice succinct intro video that the DNR put together. Much for content, but also just so you know that this is a piece that's available to you. There's a short version, and we're doing a short version of the short version tonight. And then there's a long version, and both are on YouTube online, so they're good resources to know that are available. So we'll start with that, and then sadly a few PowerPoint slides. Just to give you a little backdrop on some definitions, management, who does what with invasive species, big picture, and some of the law aspects of it. And then we're going to play a game. And then we're going to dive in and do some small group research so you can learn about different aspects of a suite of Minnesota invasive species a little bit more in depth on your own without me yammering at you. And then we'll come back around and do a little bit of sharing if we can on that piece. So that's my agenda for today, for tonight. And really, my goals, just so I want to see if these fit with what you would like out of tonight. And if not, I'd like to add to my goals. That by the end of this, I'd like you to be able to identify what aquatic invasive species are. And when I say identify what they are, I mean the legal definition. We throw around a lot of different definitions of things, but know what is meant by industry and government use of the term. I'd also like you to know the most common ways they're introduced. Oh, what? No. Oh, okay. The most common ways they're introduced into an ecosystem. Be able to identify some of the common, most pervasive ones in Minnesota, or some of the ones that are knocking on our door, and know some of the ways that we're trying to control or prevent the spread of them. And then importantly, especially as master water stewards, know resources and tools that you can use as you're working with citizens to help prevent the spread of invasive species. So those are really my big goals for tonight for you all. Any other things that you're hoping to get out tonight beyond that? It's, pretty low goals, right? Yeah. That's a lot for 2 hours, actually. Well, think about it. I'm not shy, so jump in at any point if there's something, if you have questions. So that's my agenda, but there are two pieces we need to reflect on before, and this might be what you're owing about.
No, I'm because I want you to know we have one person here who also is and one person here who is an inspector.
Who's
the inspector?
I'm the conservation club member working with Paul.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No.
I totally recognize
Completely
you.
different
And we
context.
talked about
Yep.
Project. You borrowed my book.
I did.
Sorry, and
Jen. So don't worry about it. It was a long time ago.
well, no, I'm just kind of in my
New context.
group looking, so I look like I'm looking at all of you, but yeah, you blend. That's not negative. That's just teaching. But I do want to step back. So that I just wanted you to know what to expect for tonight. I don't have a big break scheduled. You're all adults, though. If you need to step out and run to the restroom or take a phone call, go ahead, take care of your needs. Sadly, we will also be inside tonight. I'm sorry. We might do the game outside if I can wing it. Or if I can swing it. Actually, I know I can wing it. But but I want to step back before we jump into invasive species and hear just a little bit about your last session on water policy. So why don't you take out your notebooks? And we'll start, I'm going to shut up in a second. What I'd like you to do is to take a blank page, next page in your notebook, and do like a 1 minute reflection. What was either something new you learned in the water policy session, or it can be more than one thing, or the thing that stood out most to you about that session. So I'll give you about 60 seconds to jot it, so it's not a novel. Just your gut, how you remembered it. So go. 2 more seconds. Depends on which end of the second hand of it. I'll give you 15 more seconds. Wrap up whatever sentence or phrase you're on, please. Would anybody be brave enough to share your 1 minute reflection? Yes, sir.
It's just one word, as a matter of fact, that it's really fragmented.
Wow, that's a very good word to describe it, yes. Anyone else have something that sounded similar? Didn't have to be one word or anything. Yes.
It's very complex. There are a lot of different parts to it.
Fragmented, complex. And did you have?
I wrote down 3 things. One was the history, the length of time from the beginning of how the lack of specificity and currency in some of the things that relate to this, and the many levels of government involved or other agencies.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not holistic, so whatever else comes in, the road and the highway department does it, if there's no priorities, and it's not holistic.
Yeah, it's very fragmented. Very good. Yeah.
The thing that stood out for me was that
Any other?
I didn't hear
She said the thing that stood out for her was that farmland was exempt from the Clean Water Act. That's a big aha. Is that a regular occurrence? No, it's just for me.
One that I remember was that a lot of the suffrages, individual homeowners or citizens, most of it was voluntary. And they were recommendations, but that's about all they were. And to me, it seemed like a lot of the business and industry ones were a bit, well, maybe not strong enough.
Any other reflections on it? Yeah.
I was really excited about the phase, or the third phase for the construction permits with if you disturb greater than 1 acre, you have to hold that water on site indefinitely, and just how that relates to things that are happening in South Minneapolis with transit right now. So
Oh, yeah.
I was really excited about that.
That's a big difference. Any other reflections on it, on last week, the highlights? Policy's kind of a beast in any realm, but in water realm, I've taught about water for 13 years, and it's stunning to me, the complexity of it. So it's very interesting to hear that those are a lot of what you just said are aspects of the same, of that complexity that comes with it.
I have a question on, Jen, you were talking about over 1 acre, then you have to keep it all. So what about all these complexes along the greenway that they're putting up? Do they try to keep them under 1 acre so they don't have to deal with that?
Well, I know it was 3 stipulations in the permit. Was if it's greater than 1 acre, if it's a part of a development series that would disturb greater than 1 acre, or if it's on sensitive land. Is kind of the 3 different areas. So if it's in an area that would have a greater impact for a watershed. I don't know what defines that. That wasn't really spelled out. I don't know if you have a better answer. Or?
No, I don't know. I would refer you to maybe Anna, or I'm trying to think of a couple of PCA folks that would be. I'm trying to think who the stormwater construction person is.
Well, I think it now goes to the permit holders to designate accessible.
Yeah, but I would assume that there's some guidelines in there already. But again, I'm assuming. So
an
that's always the
acre
answer.
is like what compared to a city block? I shouldn't know the numbers. but-
Gosh, I can tell you. I told you that when I was an undergrad. But
Pardon me? It's about 210 feet square.
Yeah, so a city block is like 440.
A city lot is 100.
Oh, city block, he was
For
saying.
the city block.
No, yeah, that's true. I was thinking of.
So one city block would be how many acres?
Oh, no.
Depends on your,
That much.
depends on your city block.
You said it was 220, but most city blocks are 440.
220 yards.
20 yards.
Yeah.
So
By one
that's,
end.
that's 660.
Including one street.
The city block is actually an acre.
The reason
Yeah,
I'm asking
yeah.
is right along the Greenway in Uptown, they've got all these big units going up, and I was riding by one today, and it looked to me like I saw these spouts coming out from where they're going to put the patio, and they looked like they were water spouts that were going to run the water right onto the sidewalk and then right into the city stormwater. And I kind of scratched my head and said, that is,
Yeah.
doesn't look right, but maybe they had other plans or something, or I'm assuming something, but.
That one, I have no idea.
I'll look into it.
Researching that.
You call through one there. See what happens.
Yeah, I think there might be something about an increase in impervious square footage. It's like if the lot originally had X number of square foot of impervious, and the new development's got X number, I think that's where the acre has to be in the increase of impervious.
Oh.
So
Yeah,
it's like
I'll
if
take
you don't-
one more
you're not
comment on it, and then we're gonna move
changing
on.
the
Yeah.
footprint, you
So
don't-
the estimate of 5 acres for Minneapolis would be pretty good, because in New York City, it's 10 acres per city block. They're much longer
Yeah.
than Minneapolis blocks,
Yeah.
but not even twice as long. So the estimate would be excellent.
Yeah, 5 acres.
Yeah.
5 acres.
New
per
York
city
City
block.
is 10 acres per city block.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that gives some context.
So those sites are definitely, they're at least a half a city block. So
Okay.
they're 2.5 acres.
I want to move us from this. I just wanted to kind of ground us in where you've been, and then move on. And I realize you've been focused on water, a lot of water quality, and a lot of community action social marketing and how people behave and how to convince people of things and work with citizen activism. So we chose aquatic invasive species as one of the pieces because there's a lot of movement around it, a lot of citizen engagement, a lot of citizen interest in it, and a good tie to water quality, although not in the traditional science sense. It's more holistic, looking at the quality of a water system, not the what I would call scientific water quality of it, coming from a water education standpoint. I asked you, or Peggy asked you, to do a little reading ahead of time or a viewing of an assignment. And so I thought I wanted to try and pull together some knowledge from the group as a whole of what you observed. Did people have a chance to do their pre-assignment? Yes. Fantastic. Okay. I don't want to point out any people or anything, but I wasn't sure. Okay. So what I want to do is similar to this. I want to get just a sense of some of the knowledge you gained from the article you read or the news clip you watched. And obviously, all I said was something about invasive species. So that's a huge, broad category. But what I would like to know are I want to jot down some of the things that you already know about invasive species and see what our collective knowledge is. So, who would be so bold as to transition us and share some things that you know already from your reflection and your pre-assessment? Yeah, what's on?
Well, I didn't really see the article. I went to the DNR section for invasive aquatic plants where they describe like 10 of them. And I only had heard, I think, of 2 of them. The Eurasian, water milfoil, and our purple loosestrife. Was all I knew. And I also had the vague, well, I know that they're spread around the state by borders. I didn't know their origin, which is interesting. A lot of it came from cargoes and people that
Okay, so
purposefully brought in and planted a lot of them really real fast. That was about the extent of my knowledge.
okay, so
those two plants and the fact that they get spread around the boat. That's about it. But it's a great site. I found that out. It's a great reference site.
Yeah, they redid the invasive piece, and it's one of the highlights of the site right now.
Yeah, like I say, there's 10 different plants and descriptions, about how to take care of them.
I'm summarizing what you said. So some of your knowledge through the
That's
project.
to nothing is what
Well, you knew some plants, you knew, and you learned some about the origin of some and their spread. Other things that you know after this assignment, yeah.
Well, I know that in general, they displace native plants and use native habitat.
Yep. And place native habitat and species. Other things.
They typically don't have their natural predator as an invasive as well, and so they are able to reproduce and show that the natives because there's nothing keeping them in check.
Yeah. I didn't. Others, yeah.
They don't have to be non-native. They can be native plants or species that, for some reason or another, can dominate.
Okay,
For
so
example, deer without predators was the example they gave.
SPP is an abbreviation for species. I think that's a college comment. I don't think I invented that. Native species. They can be invasive or noxious.
For what?
Noxious is the word they use legally for plants. Let's add a few more in here, and then we'll move on to what you want to know. Or some other things you pulled out. Yeah.
Well, I found this article on Japanese knotweed.
Oh, yeah.
And I really hadn't heard about it before, and so I looked to see what it looked like and learned about riparian zones, which I had never heard of before, which is the interface between land and a river or a stream.
Yep.
And the thing about that is that this plant grows along waterways as one of its places. And so when there's erosion, the erosion takes the plant further. So even in this dry bed, like what would end up being a sandy bed, from erosion, the plants start popping up because they've been carried there from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fascinating plant. I've just been learning more about it myself. Actually, it's one of the ones we're going to learn about more tonight, even though it's not actually an aquatic. It affects aquatic habitats.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what plant
It's Japanese knotweed. Any other ones that you're chomping at the bit to share bits of knowledge?
They're incredibly difficult to contain or stop.
Yep.
And just one that everyone's thinking but hasn't been said yet.
I'm sorry, I missed the last thing.
To stop or contain.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
There's a question about who should pay for stopping them.
Oh. Great. So really, that is something that you don't know, I'm assuming, unless you magically figured that out. So that, I would say, probably one to know. And, I'm really doing a hybrid of what you learned as you were doing this. But we're going to end with the learning of what we do, what you've learned by the end of tonight. So I'm kind of mashing up your pre-class or your pre-assignment with tonight. So one of the ones that I heard, okay, so who pays? What are some other things that you want to know more about? Or after doing this piece, or just in general knowledge? Yeah.
I want to know more about the current state of research around containing or eradicating.
Current research, yep. And I will say,
Like what works?
Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'd like to know what works, but what I'm really getting at is where are they in the process of researching various hypotheses and solutions?
educator, like, to help the layperson?
Who's the what?
The educator. Like, how can people go get information? Because in my piece, I learned what this fella had to do, and it could take up to 5 years. It was a Japanese knotweed, and I think it was the same plant, because they listed a few, and he initially thought it was like a beautiful flower that he cultivated, and then realized it was like a cancer. That was his words in the garden, and you know, I wouldn't have known. He cut it and put the herbicide down, but it would take years.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was quite a shocker.
So who teaches? What are the
where can the
resources?
public go?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to go back to the no, just because it has to do with the article I did.
Sure.
And that would be that human beings are the species that encourages or most responsible for invasive species.
I'm paraphrasing, just that primarily human spread. Other things you want to know? Yeah.
Maybe like a hallway speech for us as stewards of what we should tell people.
There will be
An elevator speech?
Yeah.
A little longer than an elevator.
Yeah.
Yeah, walk into the water fountain thing.
Other things you want to know? Yeah.
Kind of what Jean's saying, but it's more specific. Like, is there anybody that's trying to make boats, like, put a surface on boats so that things can't move from continent to continent on boats? Or even from one place to the other in Britain?
Putting down international regulations, but you also are talking about technology, surfacing boats. I'll put down surfacing boats because there's, I don't know if we'll get answers to all this in 2 hours, but, and technology in general. Okay, I have room for one more if there's one more want to know. We can answer other want to knows tonight, but. Yeah.
If there's a land version of the Clean Drain Drive
Oh, yeah.
campaign.
Say that again.
If there's a land version of the Clean Drain Drive,
I'm going to say
Clean Drain
terrestrial.
Drives for aquatic invasive species for how to help stop things from going from one river or lake to the next when you're dealing with your own watercrafts, but how can you do that with your car or
terrestrial
your garden,
program.
things like that.
Yeah, what's that?
How do we quantify
Play Clean Go, yeah. It's a new one.
Ooh, that's a question I have.
Wanted to make it
That's a
seem
great
as
question.
seamless as a Clean Drain Drive. Clean.
Actually, these are all great questions. Okay. And we won't answer all of these tonight. I'll tell you that right now. But these are good starting places.
I just had a question about the very first K. I must have missed it. What does that say?
Oh,
What
Eurasian water milfoil.
Oh, okay, sorry.
He was just talking about specific species.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, don't be. There's a lot of abbreviating while not just in invasives, but
I got it.
after you're saying aquatic invasive species a billion times, it makes sense that we say AIS because. Okay, so this is some of what knowledge you either had prior to class. I mean, just because you had it already, or because you did your research project. Some of the things you want to know based on that, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of that by the end of tonight. We'll end with going over the learn and see what we can fit. Hopefully, it won't even come close. Or I mean, we'll need like 2 more whiteboards to fill that one. But I'm going to start by giving you just a little taste of knowledge in a visual setting that I can't do by chatting. So we'll do, I think it's about 5 minutes of this video, and it's a really nice intro, and then a little bit more sitting time, and then I'll get you up, I promise. Sorry, it was really loud for you. I will rely on last row.
The state of Minnesota is blessed with an immense wealth of natural wonders, thousands of pristine lakes, rivers, and streams. Minnesota also has a rich outdoor heritage with virtually unlimited access to boating, swimming, and fishing. But that heritage is now threatened by aquatic invasive species that jeopardize recreation and the delicate ecological order. It's time for us to take that threat seriously. More than 24 aquatic invasive species have invaded Minnesota's waters. Our challenge is to keep these invading species from spreading further and to prevent new ones from getting a foothold in our state. What do we mean by aquatic invasive species? They're plants and animals that live in the water and are not native to Minnesota. When these species are accidentally or intentionally transplanted into our waters, they can upset the ecological balance. No matter how they get here, the environmental consequences can be severe. Creatures like zebra and quagga mussels were transported in the late 1980s from the Black and Caspian Seas of Europe and Asia. They came in the ballast tanks of ocean-going ships and were unwittingly discharged from ballast water into the Great Lakes. New species of carp brought here from Asia are creating headaches both above and below the water's surface. And Eurasian water milfoil grows in the mats on the water's surface that interfere with swimming and boating and diminish the visual appeal of our lakes. These seemingly unrelated species share a common and disturbing trait. In our ecosystem, they lack disease and predator controls, so these non-native species reproduce and spread at an amazing pace. The consequence is that they compete with native species for food and habitat. This can dramatically affect commercial, tourism, and recreational uses of Minnesota's well-known lakes and rivers. Foremost among the invertebrate invaders are zebra mussels, small striped mollusks about the size of your thumbnail that multiply at incredible rates. The zebra mussels encrust rocks, docks, boats, and water supply intakes with a sharp coating of shells. Meanwhile, their larger but lesser-known relatives, quagga mussels, colonize deeper water. Like relentless underwater vacuum cleaners, zebra and quagga mussels voraciously filter algae and plankton from the water, taking food away from native clams and upsetting the natural balance in lakes and rivers. While this filtering may make the water clearer, it also reduces the food supply that sustains plants and fish. So, how are zebra and quagga mussels spread to new locations? These and other aquatic invasive species hitchhike in several ways, by attaching to things that have been in the water, by clinging to aquatic plants, and by being carried with the water itself. Once introduced to a lake or river, zebra mussels appear on docks, boat lifts, shallow rocks, and aquatic plants. Within a few years, an entire watershed can be infested. Sharp shells are attached to rocks and wash up on beaches, discouraging swimming. A loss of tourism dollars can follow. Less widespread, but grabbing lots of headlines, are carp from Asia, specifically the bighead and silver carp species, which pose a significant threat to Minnesota waters. Bighead and silver carp are voracious plankton eaters that strain the water of nutrients and outcompete native fish species for food. Originally stocked in aquaculture ponds in the south to control algae, floods allow them to escape into the Mississippi River drainage and move upstream. They are prolific breeders, capable of virtually taking over entire stretches of river, altering the local fish community dramatically. While bighead carp eat more and grow larger, it's the high-flying silver carp that offer vivid evidence of the invasion. Approaching boats can scare entire schools of silver carp into leaping out of the water, causing serious injuries when they hit boaters and personal watercraft users. Eurasian water milfoil is one of the plant invaders which has become a nuisance in many Minnesota waters. The introduction of Eurasian milfoil to America can be traced to the aquarium trade, where plants were imported for use in fish tanks but ended up in local waters. Eurasian milfoil is an aggressive rooted plant that quickly grows to the surface. It spreads out across the water's surface, forming an umbrella-like canopy that blocks sunlight and chokes out the native plants below. Milfoil forms dense, unsightly cover through which it's difficult to swim or navigate. Small pieces of milfoil carried on boats and recreational gear can seed a new invasion if they are carried to other lakes. Minnesota law requires...
At the risk of ending where it's kind of negative, I'm going to stop right there. This is the first 5 minutes of the 11-minute short version of this. There's also a 28-minute version of this. Like I said, they're both on YouTube. You're welcome to look. You can also get a DVD of this from the DNR's Info Center. It's called Aquatic Invasive Species, Minnesota Waters at Risk. I think if you Google Minnesota DNR, Minnesota Waters at Risk, it pops up as the YouTube link will pop up really right up top. Okay, I wanted to start with that because you got to see some good aquatic habitat and some some really concrete pieces, and I think that's a nice way to get started. Hold on a second here, I gotta switch my... Okay, now, like I promised, we'll do a little PowerPoint here, but I'm going to... I had to switch my... Oh. Why are you not doing this now? Hold on 1 second here. There we go. Gives it 1 second to reboot, and then we'll do this. And you don't have to see my notes. You can just see my cute kids. Okay. Not for long. Oh, it did it the wrong way. Wait a minute. Number 2. Let's try this again. Oh, I thought I was...
Meantime, that's Robert on the left and Jared on the right.
Yeah. And the tall one in the middle. Okay. So here we are. And some of this will be a little redundant, but I'm a big fan of definitions. And in my current job, I actually run a permit program and permit businesses that need training on aquatic invasives. So I spend a lot of time with definitions, legal definitions, and helping those business owners understand their requirements. But when I talk aquatic invasive species, or if I say AIS tonight, I mean non-native species that aren't native to Minnesota, or even to a region within Minnesota. So to the ecosystem you're considering at the time, and their introduction causes or is very likely to cause some kind of damage, either environmental harm, human health harm, or economic harm. Yeah, I got all three. So it's got to be that, because we have a lot of exotic species in Minnesota that don't cause a problem. Matter of fact, and don't quote this one, but there's something called the 10% rule. And I've been doing a little very preliminary research on how accurate this is, but there was a researcher, and this was based on a text in the 90s that, and I think even before that there was reference to it, that only 10% of any introduced species can survive at all, and then another maybe 10% of that might actually become invasive. So maybe 1% of all the things that are shared around the world become problems. And I'm looking into this. I just haven't had time to really dig and find the research and track back to be able to cite it properly. And even if it's not completely accurate, though, there's a lot of truth to the fact that many more things are transported that don't survive from different parts of the country or the world. So it is fascinating that these are the things that are, not to label them, the troublemakers, or they're just very successful at what they do. Yeah.
Doesn't invasive spread to neighboring states and all that? Just obviously, because I mean, I moved from Oregon. And these are 2 years ago, so these are new to me, obviously. But I mean, is there one that's actually problematic throughout, or is the climate too varied?
There are
like a large chunk of.
There are a number that are very common. A lot of terrestrial ones. A lot of plants are. And there are a number of aquatic, and wait a few years, and a lot of them are marching either south, north, or west.
Spreading a lot
they
more
spread.
than neighboring.
And it's not just the United States that has this. We export a lot of things to other parts of the world.
Yeah.
So.
Most of the United States doesn't even resemble what it looked like 400 years ago.
Yeah. So some of this.
That have been in there.
Right, yeah. One, you talked about white-tailed deer. They weren't originally in Minnesota a long time ago. So it depends on what date you set.
Yeah.
So, but these are ones that are moving at a more, the thing too is that these are moving at a much more rapid pace of change. Oh my gosh. I had a rough night with my cute kids last night. We had 2 wet beds last night. Woo. Okay, so we're going to move on. And I have some pictures up here. I'm not really delving into the guts of some of these things. You'll learn more. So if you're chomping at the bit to know all these pictures, settle down, don't worry. Not that you're really being that anxious. But as I said earlier, this is from a water quality standpoint. If you talk to somebody at the DNR, on average about invasive species, aquatic invasives, and water quality, they would say no, there's no connection, other than there's a general broad ecological connection. But in the sense of the water, the whole quality of a system, there's a huge connection. And in some cases, especially when you start broadening to all invasive species, and you include the plants, the land plants, like the Japanese knotweed is one of the examples I picked for tonight, that has a huge impact on water, on actual scientific water quality. Another one, buckthorn, has a huge impact on water quality and erosion. And so there definitely are some of those direct science water quality connections, but tonight I'm thinking much more holistically, the system and the health of a system. All right, so in Minnesota we classify all of our invasive species as prohibited, regulated, unregulated, or unlisted. They're in these categories. And I don't expect you to memorize this. If you ever want more, it's all on the DNR website. But I want you to pay particularly close attention to the top two. Prohibited and regulated are the ones that the laws and the regulations are there to really work to protect against. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture and Minnesota Department of Natural Resources are the two state agencies that have jurisdiction, or I should say regulatory authority over invasives.
Who it was again?
DNR, and we're the aquatic invasives, and Department of Ag, Minnesota Department of Ag, or MDA. They are in charge of like the noxious weed list and all of the terrestrial. And these are very crude there's more complexity to it. Much as the water world, there are multiple layers. Well, I'll get to that. I have a slide about that. We'll get back to that. But I want you to see some pictures and get some species associated with these categories. So prohibited, these are the ones that the law says you cannot possess, you cannot transport, you cannot introduce in a free living state into the water. So zebra and in the little video you saw, was that a little blurry? I didn't even notice. Or is that okay?
It is a little blurry.
I think it's a little blurry. It's kind of bugging me now. Interrupting my own presentation. Oh my gosh, look at that. That sounds beautiful. Okay. But quagga mussels are...
My glasses are really good.
Quagga mussels are one I hadn't heard of before taking this job, and they're basically a cousin of the zebra mussel. Not much of a problem in Minnesota yet, hopefully not, period. Some places out west, it's the opposite, where they have more quaggas, like Lake Mead is a great example. They have both, but quaggas are like king there. And coincidentally, zebras and quaggas are both, well, quagga is in real life, not the mussel, is like an extinct relative of the zebra. Random. Why would you name it that? Because they're both striped. So at any rate, there are quaggas in Lake Superior. So they are on the border, but so far we've been fortunate about those. So we're ahead of the game already regulatory-wise. Like you can't have them, you can't transfer them. Asian carp, which there are 4 species of Asian carp. When you hear people just say Asian carp, it means grass carp, black carp, and then the 2 in the video were big head carp and silver. Silver are the showy ones because they're the jumpers. In some ways, they have less impact than the big head. I mean, they're all can be quite damaging. Faucet snails, that would be this teeny little snail that fits on a penny, on the side of a penny. They are newly added to the prohibited invasive species list in Minnesota. They carry a parasite that is deadly to waterfowl. So I think they've been responsible now for close to 200,000 waterfowl deaths in the state. That's a newer one to Minnesota. And it's the same process. If anyone's ever had swimmer's itch, that's really fun, I know. If you haven't had it, yay. But it's the same thing. I got it a few years ago, so I looked up how you get it. And it's parasite that is a host in a different, a native snail. But it thinks you're a duck, and it tries to get into your skin like it would on a duck. And then when you come out of the water and you start drying off, it starts to try and burrow. And not like in a big, gross, noticeable way. It just itches. You can't see them. They're teeny. What?
I had that when I was young.
Yeah, it's not fun. Let me just tell you.
We get it at the lake my parents' cabin, they have it.
Yep.
Some of my siblings break out and they look like they've been attacked by some kind of rash or something.
It's not fun. But it's the same mechanism. So that's a common mechanism between parasites snails and waterfowl. It's just that our waterfowl haven't had any time to adapt to the parasite that faucet snails carry. So it's been big die-offs, not the normal fluctuation of that relationship with local parasites. Round goby is just up in Lake Superior. It's a teeny little innocuous fish. It messes up the ecosystem there. Eurasian water milfoil is this matted here, and flowering rush, this pretty little one here. Those are all prohibited. You can never have them except if you get special permits to possess or to transport them for specific causes. But one thing I should say, the list is much longer than this. I have it in my notes section, and I'm not going to show you, but it's probably like maybe 20 to 30, I guess 30 different things. I'm showing you the highlights, there's some on here like the nutria. It is not a problem in Minnesota yet, but we're ahead of the game. That's a big invasive in some states. So there's some that are put on this list that we never want to actually have to actively defend against, if that makes sense.
And they're already regulated? No.
Well, we have them on the list so that if they start working, we don't have to go through new lawmaking. We've got common invasives that are headed around the country, and it's not like they put a laundry list of all of them, but they put the big ones. Okay, so let's go back to here. Oh, you know what? I forgot I have this little clicker thing. Oh, well, this one's working. All right. All right, regulated is the next category. Now, these are ones that you can actually have in your possession, but you cannot introduce them into natural waters, into free-living state waters. So a good example are these snails down here, mystery snails, Chinese mystery snails, and banded mystery snails. They're aquarium snails. They're really common. They've been around a long time, and when people, either kids or parents, decide that the aquarium is no longer fun and they want to free their inhabitants to a better life, what they end up doing is either killing off the ones that don't survive a painful death, or freeing some that take over and become a problem. Rusty crayfish is one, very aggressive crayfish. I was just listening to guys, I was doing a training for my service provider businesses today, and one guy was talking about a lake that has a ton of them. I think it was up in Leech Lake. And they all climb onto his fishing line if you put them down to, and they chop up the vegetation, make the habitat really hard for the rest of the species there, and they outcompete all the native kind of meek crayfish. But you can catch them and eat them. Yes, you can catch them and eat them. So that is why they're not prohibited. So if you want to fish for them, and you can't transport them alive, you have to axe them, but you could have a little nice crab boil on the side of the river or the lake.
And were they introduced from aquariums or something?
No, these, if I remember correctly, there's also another crayfish. I have to double check. One of them is actually from educational use. So dissecting them or using them in the classroom, obviously not the dissected ones, but using them to learn about systems, science classrooms, and then that was another example of you're free. And that's, I think this one I have to double check. There are two. Bait. These are the bait, but there's a new one that is red something. And I didn't even bring cards or anything about it because it's so new. I was just like, too many. I picked and choose from me. This little gem this is a whole set of these. This is the spiny water flea, well named. That's a picture taken through a microscope because they're only like 3/8 of an inch long at their largest. And so this is a fishing line with a ton of them hanging on. Yeah, and so they disrupt the food chain because they're spiky, as you can tell. So little fish either don't eat them, or if the bigger ones eat them, then it rips them up and they don't eat anything else. Yeah, they're impressive little buggers, and there's not much yet that eats them. So these are regulated. So you got prohibited, like zebra mussels. You can't drive on the road with a zebra mussel on your boat. That's against the law. Regulated, you can move them around if they're dead, but you cannot put them into a water body. Does that make sense? Okay. The other, yeah.
What about the Asian carp? I've heard some people talk about them for food.
Oh, there's some very interesting discussion, not just on carp, but on other species about can we make this into a food source. It's very, yeah, it's, I don't know enough to be able to talk very intelligently about it, other than I know that there's some discussion of it, but there's some challenges with finding market and shipping and enough market in the United States. So I know there are people looking into, can we farm them and ship them back to Asia? Because there's a big market there. They eat a lot of it.
Can you go back and share
Yeah.
flower on that last one either? Did you talk about
Oh, sorry, that's yellow flag. One of my favorite, yellow iris. It's beautiful. It's all around the lake. I walk around with my kids. It's it was brought for water gardens. That's another. The water garden industry is another commonplace, especially for water-related plants that are invasive. And again, it's one that you could have in your own water garden in your yard, but it's not supposed to be able to escape. And a lot of these things are good at escaping. That's part of the tricky thing.
how does that propagate?
I think just like regular.
Naturalized.
Yeah. So either people spread it, and because it's so successful, like any of these things, if it's in a new area, it's like, ooh, I'm gonna take over.
Are those penalties very big if you were to be caught with any of these?
We'll come back to that. Good question. Then there are those two other weird categories: unregulated and what's the other one? This one is the last one. Unlisted. Thanks. Good note takers. So unregulated are our friends like the brown trout is not native to Minnesota, but we sure like to fish it and eat it. And it's not invasive. It's manageable. We manage it quite well. And it doesn't, there's some competition with other trout species, but it doesn't have the effects that a lot of other invasive species do. Same with the ring-necked pheasant. I mean, we definitely manage for them, so you could argue that there's some differences in how natural resources are managed to support hunting of them, but they don't decimate an area like a lot of the others. Yeah.
So the trout is invasive, but it's only, or not invasive, but it's titled that because it's not native. Because you said it's not invasive, and we fish them and they're manageable, but.
But we still call them invasive. So I think it's because we can. That's a good question. I'll have to ask about that one. But I think it's because we can manage them and they don't get out of control. I'll see if I can get back to you.
Are they managed because they're fished?
That's a part of it, but I mean that's the main reason we're interested in them. Is we want to fish them and eat them. Yeah.
That would seem like there's a whole ton of ones in that
Yes,
category,
there are plenty.
depending on how far you go back.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And I don't know how they set when we label things, but there's a long list there, and that full list is on our site too. The unlist. Oh, I'm sure it's not. None of these lists are completely complete from what I can tell. And the last one I don't even have a slide for. Unlisted are things like piranha, or aquarium fish, aquarium plants, things that are very exotic. And in order to have them here, you already have to go through regulation, and they're not likely to escape and be a problem. So that's that fourth category. All right, this is taking a little more than I wanted. So I want to zip through some of these. I already mentioned the DNR and Department of Ag are the two regulators in the state. Down here, there are a bunch of federal players: the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Coast Guard, the EPA, Fish and Wildlife Service. They're all involved in national and regional invasive species, both terrestrial and invasive, but they don't regulate locally, and they're not major players in a lot of the policies. Well, they do set, like all federal government, they do set some policy, but in Minnesota, and the laws we pay attention to, or you have to pay attention to, are much more at the state level. Tribes are often involved in the planning as well as their own nations. And the two pieces I want to point out here, the smaller bullets, there's a Minnesota Invasive Species Advisory Council that is kind of like Watershed Partners. It's a group of maybe 30 different agencies at different governmental levels, nonprofits, lots of different parties. It's probably actually more than 30. I bet it's more like 50. But they meet and they have set a statewide plan for policy and collaboration on how we're going to deal with invasive species. A lot of this stuff too is done in partnership and actually enacted by a lot of local governments. So cities, counties, watershed districts, and nonprofits like lake associations do a lot of grants, a lot of watercraft inspection. A lot of the programs are partnered with state agencies as well. Where did I put mine? I put these two backwards. Well, there is a designated infested waters list right now. It's a really long scrolling beast of a PDF. We're hoping to have it as a database so you can search it. Right now, though, you can find it in your fishing regulations book, although it's only as current as the latest printing, because they print that once a year. So by this time of the year, there's usually some more infested waters. But there are signs like this at public accesses that show if it's an infested water. You can look up the list on the website or the Minnesota State Register. They have a newsletter, and you can also look it up on their website or through their updates. Or you can just call and ask your local DNR staff. You all have an aquatic invasive species person. And let's see, Hennepin County, that would be Keegan Lund. And he's out of the Warner Road, the fisheries office, the regional headquarters, not the downtown main DNR office, but the regional office. And he's the one that if you think you found zebra mussels in a new lake, you call him and he'll go check it out, that sort of thing. He does permitting for plant vegetation control, that sort of thing as well. And that's good to know where if you're working or playing in infested waters for spreading things. All right, I'm almost done with this dirge. Wow. This team management plan for invasives, it's really key. Prevention is the number one thing. We're just trying to slow stuff, keep it out, because once it's here, there's really no eradication. You can control some things, but you can't really. So far with most species, they're here. So because of that, there's early detection, rapid response plans, and containment plans. The DNR has taken the state plan and applied it to us. So we have rapid response. We've got protocols set in. As soon as there's a sighting, we have a strict line of rules that you follow, who's contacted, how we verify it, and the communication, and the new signage, and press releases. It's a pretty slick machine, and we're getting better at it, sadly. It's good and bad. Management and control, and a lot of research, Jeannie goes into this part too. The DNR is active with some research, although the new invasive species, aquatic invasive species research center at the U of M, and just U of M, what's his name, Sorensen, is the lead guy at the U. Yeah, they are major leads on what's new. But there are a lot of projects. Minnehaha Creek is sponsoring research on some biological controls and possibilities there for plant control for milfoil. There are some weevils they're looking into. There are some insects that are promising for helping control loosestrife. But a lot of that research is taking a lot of time and a lot of money to get there. The one success story on the management and control of all our invasives is the sea lamprey. Thousands and thousands and probably millions of dollars actually went into research and figuring out, but there's a lampricide we treat with and can kill off 90% of the sea lamprey. So it's an expensive maintenance, but it's doable, and it doesn't seem to be affecting any of the other fisheries in Lake Superior. And then finally, the purpose is, like in the water world, there's so many players. If there's leadership and coordination among them, that will make a huge difference. And trying to have the same messaging like the Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers national program or the Clean Drain Dry, a lot of continuity in language. Really, we're trying, as I said, prevent and contain infestations when we can't keep them out. I'm going to skip that one. All right, so this is where the rubber hits the road. This is what the DNR and a lot of partners actually doing to prevent. And this is outside of research and figuring out what else we can do. That's a given. That's already going on. But watercraft inspection, and with that, the last one down here, decontamination. The DNR now has decontamination stations. Minnehaha Creek has some. We have grant programs with local units of government around the state where we help train people as inspectors. And we now can give them our legal agency authority to be a level 1 inspector so that they have the force of law behind in some cases. There are also a lot of lake associations and groups that have inspectors that are volunteer, that are non-regulatory at all. They can educate and inform and help the public, but they can't say don't go in the water or you have a fine, or they don't have the legal authority behind them. A lot of public awareness, the signage, and we've got a ton of laws and regulations now that go with this, and then the enforcement, the permits to help with that, and then the enforcement to back it up. These are the signs that you may sadly be familiar with. This is the one you'll see, and I'll have a picture of whatever the species is that's invasive. So at Duluth, you'll see a lot of little pictures of Lake Superior. And then just some what do you do kinds of messaging at a lot of accesses. Okay, you don't really need to read this text. This is really for me. But some of the things that are new law in the last few years, you cannot transport any aquatic plants. Nobody can, except duckweed. So you don't have to panic if you have duckweed on your boat when you pull it out. But whether it's invasive or not, they decided, the legislature said, no, we're not going to have conservation officers trying to ID a plant at 40 miles an hour or figure out what's what. It's not hard to take your plants off your stuff before you transport. So no plants. That's one. You cannot possess or transport zebra mussels or those other prohibited lists, which means they can't be attached to your boat while you're hauling it. With one exception, you can get a little form online to transport at the end of the season and take your contaminated boat back home to decontaminate it. So that's a one-way pass to get you there to clean it up. The one other exception you all might want to know about, you can always take a baggie or a specimen to a DNR office of something you're suspicious of. If you do decide to do that, I think I'll get back to it later, make sure you ideally have a GPS location of where you had it from, maybe a photo with the GPS, can't think of the right word, geocoding or geospatial in your cell phone, your smartphone, not your smart brain, but your smartphone will have that in it if you've got a smartphone. Anyway, the more specific you can be about a site, that would be fantastic. You can't transport any water anymore, whether it's infested or non-infested waters. That means you can drain your bait buckets between sites. If you want to take your minnows from one site to another lake to fish later that day, you got to bring buckets of clean water and leave them in your car. Dump everything lakeside, take your minnows up to your car so it's obvious to the officer, if he or she should see you, that you're putting in clean water, not lake water. Because the baby zebra mussels are microscopic and they float in the water. So that's one of the best ways they like to travel and hitchhike from one water to another. So and you have to drain your ballast water, any water out of your boat, and you have to drive with your boat plug undone. So if you're not a boat owner, that might not mean a lot to you, but if you trailer a boat, that's actually been a big one for people because they usually leave it in so they don't forget it when they launch their boat and have their boat start sinking. So that's when you cannot transport water anymore, and that's fairly new. And then you can't introduce or try to introduce any of those prohibiteds, which it's not like people take fistfuls of zebra mussels and throw them in. It's them putting in their equipment with plants or prohibited species that you get ticketed.
But April, there was a suspicion that that's what they control.
Really? Oh, did not know that. By?
Fishermen.
Oh, to be a good fishing source? That's funny, I did not know that. I will have to look into that. So there's the drain plug. And one of the newest laws, it's only about a year old. If you have a dock, a lift, or any long-term water-related equipment, boat lifts and docks and swim rafts, if you're going to put that into a different water body, you have to dry it for 21 days. Wow. And that's for everybody. And the exception is, if you're just pulling your dock up at the end of the season at a cabin or something and you put it on your property, he can put it back in. You don't in the spring. You don't have to clean it off, because if you're decontaminated and you're not moving it anywhere, or I mean, if you're in infested waters, it doesn't, reinfest and reinfest.
Yeah.
There's no reason. But this is because zebra mussels, big, strong, strapping, giant ones, can in cool, dark, moist conditions, can survive at least a couple of weeks inside of the tubing. So of like dock posts and stuff. So the 21 days is like the biggest, baddest, most awesome zebra mussel's not going to make it. That's one not everybody knows about. So. And who asked me back? You asked about fines. They doubled all the fines last year. So now you can get civil or criminal penalties for this. Although talking with conservation officers, they usually do civil. They don't think that the most judges would give the whole $1,000 you can do for misdemeanor. They think that it might be even less than the civil penalties, because they see everything, and so a lot of judges have a different view of it. So any conservation officer or peace officer can ticket for transporting on the road, $100; for launching with plants attached, $200; transporting or possessing for any prohibited species, that's $500. So the guy from North Dakota that thought it would be awesome to take home the shopping cart with zebra mussels all over it that you might have seen in the news last year, he left Minnesota with a $1,000 fine, $500 for transporting, and there's another one. Or maybe it's just $500, and I think he got two. Launching into non-infested waters with any invasives on, that's $500 too. Those are the serious ones. Don't pull your drain plug, that's $100. If you're transporting infested water without a permit, that's $100. So in the civil world, think of parking tickets, think of speeding tickets. Not that I've ever received one. These are a little bigger than your average speeding ticket. So these are pretty steep fines from a civil fine perspective. And this came from the legislature, which came from citizens. So it was a big demand for this change.
What would constitute a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor?
It's up to the conservation officer to decide. I think it's just the severity of the instance. If it's, some yokel that has stuff on his boat and is just being kind of lame about it versus, something really heinous, I'm not sure. The folks that I regulate, the lake service providers, they're the folks that install and remove docks and boat lifts and boats and irrigation equipment. Anybody that's installing, removing, decontaminating, or renting water-related equipment, those folks have to be permitted. They have to come to a class, learn about invasives. They get a permit. They pay they do this every 3 years. It's a $50 permit fee. And if they don't have their permit, or if their staff don't do a free online training with a little certificate, they can be fined. And there's one more. I'm forgetting one more of my fines.
Do you know how many people are fined?
Well, this is all new. Yes, they are. That's the clue. But a lot of these fines are in their first or second year of the levels I just showed you. So it's happening. And it's starting to be taken more seriously now. All right, so what you can do, you can report invasives if you think you've spotted something. If you're familiar with the site and you see something unusual, go to the DNR site, and this link, or if you just go to the basic invasive site, it says, you want to report invasives? Is it a plant, animal, this? And it'll walk you through the steps. It's very straightforward. It's very nice. Education is key to this, letting people know what's out there, how it's spread, what they can do to stop it. So you can get trained. The DNR does volunteer trainings, not for official inspectors, those we hire, but there are a lot of partnerships, like I mentioned, with lake associations, and a lot of ways that you can get trained as a volunteer and educate and help inspect boats. Then there's a ton of educational resources that we've got, both terrestrial, like the earthworm one, that poster. You can get grant money to get actual signs for lakes if that's in your area. There are a bunch of like brochures and tent cards and all sorts of resources. In back, there's tons of these little ID cards on different species that if you know that's an issue in your area, you can get those from us. A lot of cool stuff. If you go to mndnr.gov/invasives, it walks you through. It does break it down into aquatic and terrestrial, and a little cumbersome, but it's fairly well done. And then the Sea Grant program is another big player. They don't have regulatory authority, but University of Minnesota Sea Grant, based out of Duluth, they have fabulous resources as well online. So those are the go-tos. If you're going to do a project on invasives, go to the DNR site and the Sea Grant site, and if you're going to do terrestrial invasives, you can go to Department of Ag as well. And you asked about terrestrial, a terrestrial version. I put this in. We have a new program at DNR called Play Clean Go, and it's all there. And we hired a marketing firm to do it, so it's actually quite good. And there are different spins on this. There's a Work Keep Clean Go for staff, and it's all about using boot brushes, watching your equipment for spreading of seeds. Because in the terrestrial world, that's a lot of equipment or the stuff you're wearing. You'll get seeds attached to your clothes. There's a lot of really common things that hikers and outdoor workers and then recreationalists do to spread invasives on land. So there's a ton of cool stuff. If you go to the DNR to Clean Go, you'll find a lot there. Okay. Oh my goodness. Woo! We gotta move. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. So I put this up here, and I also put a link to, although you're all with Keegan Lund, so you can just Google Keegan. But if you look up your contacts, you can find more information there.
And you're going to send me that PowerPoint? Or you
Yes,
already did
I will send it. How do you guys feel about playing a game out on the sidewalk?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. You will need to carry your chair outside, but nothing else. You good with that? Yep. Okay, we're going to go take a movement break. Holy cow. You get an advantage because you reproduce more, you are more aggressive, you don't have as many things trying to eat you. So you guys get to circle the chairs like you did last time. Everyone else that's a native species, the rest of you, need to step out to the edge of the sidewalk and circle from this distance. Are we ready? Any questions? All right, so can we be aggressive? Yep, without injury. You can get them with no injury.
I was looking forward to it. Yeah. I got some intense aggression.
Are you taking chairs away?
Do it according to the airplane noise.
Yeah, they have.
You can keep going until you find something. Now look at that magic. Still enough habitat, right? I think everybody's got a spot. I would like to take that one extra chair away. All right, so we're going to do another round. This time, though, if you are one of the invasives, stand up and leave your card behind. Put your card on your chair. And, well, we'll just... Okay, so the rest of you, everybody now stand up. And, well, you're still all invasive, so I'm giving you another round. So for the invasive, you get to stay invasive. Once invasive. All right, so you all sit at your advantage. We'll do another round. Y'all ready? They can sit on any chair still. Ready? Go. Let's see. Find a spot. Quick, hurry. I like that there's enough chairs in this one because it kind of... Now, if you just sat on a card, you are now. So... Okay, so if you sat down on the card, you are invasive. So if you are invasive, stand up so we can see how many people are invasive. Oh, look at that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us now are invasive. So that's round 2. We're going to do one more round. Put him back on the chair and come get another one from me. If you're invasive, I'm going to have you, because I'm holding this thing, come up and grab whichever one you're really going to fight now. If you sat on one, grab another. You can. I don't care which one you want. One win. Everyone else do one. I just love it more. You're a loon. All right, so everybody stand up. We're going to do one last round. Face yourself accordingly. Now, if you're invasive, remember, you get to go right up against the chair. If you're not invasive, you got to step back. And leave leave the original card. Not the one you just collected, but the original one. Leave that on there. All right, are we ready? Okay, let's go. Yes! There's one over here.
I'm still making
Okay, now let's go the other way. How many people are not invasive? Either not sitting or holding a card. Stand up. Let's see how many are left. Oh, 2 are not invasive. I win. And if you were elementary students or teachers, I would have a whiteboard and we could be graphing this. But then you can see the population change over time. This is a very What do you think? Would you do something like this if you're working with community members? Yeah. I will not be offended if you say no. Yeah, I think so. This is just a snippet. This is actually Project Wet Activity.
I think the thing is that somebody who never boats or does anything like that in water, somebody sits there like, I can care. Yeah. So I don't have a boat to drain. So that's the next thing.
Well,
in terms of it would be helpful.
A lot of gardeners.
Like water gardeners? I mean, I'm a gardener, but...
Well, yeah, there's a lot of restaurants. ornamental plants.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so I think it would be important to focus, if you were talking to gardeners, you want to example.
Oh, definitely.
But that's not to say that gardeners aren't voters as well.
Right, yeah, but, so, I don't know.
So yeah, you want to know your audience, and you want to know, or if it's people living in the New Hampshire watershed district that want to enjoy the creek, they're going to care about zebra mussels. Well, they might not, but there's zebra mussels in the creek. And finding out what are the triggers. They want a beach on the shoreline that's totally encrusted with shells that don't meet. Once you have a zebra mussel lake, you can't go there. So there are different fishing and other recreation that tie in for some of these species. It's not going to fit for every audience, but there's a lot of tie-ins. Alright, let's grab our chairs and head in. We need a mussel shell. There are small zebra mussels in this vial with a teeny vial with teeny ones in there. There's a couple epoxied postery looking things with Eurasian water milfoil, and one is milfoil and zebra mussels combined. And then another zebra mussel on native mussel. And zebra mussels in that one. And there's some mystery snails. They're Chinese or banded mystery snails back here. So feel free while we're doing our next.
Is that actually the name of them?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Chinese mystery snails and banded mystery snails.
Okay.
I'm not like no, that's their actual. I'm not making up.
I brought in a species. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah. What I'm going to have you do is some small group research to get to know some of these species a little bit better. And so the way we're going to do this, do we have everyone in the room? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Everyone who's in the room is here.
14, 15. Okay, we're missing. 16, I think. Okay, so we're going to do, I think, groups of 4, and if I miscounted and we have a group of 5, that's fine, but I think if we've got 16, then it's groups of 4. What you're going to get from me to do your research, since we are not online here, we're doing this old school. Each group is going to get a folder that has, I copied out fact sheets about 14 different species from the DNR website. They're not in order of priority. They're just ones that I picked out that are either in Minnesota, near Minnesota, and all are aquatic except 2. I put 2 terrestrials in here that I mentioned earlier, buckthorn and Japanese knotweed, because they have such an impact on water quality and erosion. So I did include those. The list, you'll also get 2 handouts. Each group will get enough handouts. Everyone has their own. You can staple it or glue it into your notebook. And it has the list of 14 species in the folder, and then it has 4 research topics. The research topics, and I keep saying research, this is getting to know. This will be a relatively quick piece. Yeah, quick study topics. So there'll be 4 people in a group. One person is going to try and get to know the origin and means of spread for all 14 things. But if you don't get through all 14, don't panic.
Okay.
It's always good to have more, right? Don't panic. You always over-prepare when you're teaching. No, but listen. One person in the group is only responsible for knowing the origin and means of spread for as many of those 14 species as you have time to get through. Does that make sense? Another person will look at the impacts. And again, I don't want you to write a thesis on this. There's already a lot of that. This is just highlights so that I don't have to lecture you and you don't have to do big, long lectures to each other. You're going to start to look for patterns and share within your group once you've had a chance to look for your particular research topic. So origin and means of spread, the impacts, how are they classified, are they prohibited, regulated, unregulated, unlisted, and what's their status and location in Minnesota, as best you can tell, keeping in mind I've just given you a fact sheet and there's some little tidbits in the back, but it's not going to be exhaustive, just an idea of it. And the last one is if they list any prevention or control measures. things that citizens can do or things that are being done. And the fact sheets vary on what is included on them. There's some consistency in a lot of it, but you'll find different amounts of information for different ones. Does that make sense? Okay. The one other piece I'm giving you, each group will get one other handout that, again, I did enough so you all get to take one because I think you'll want this one. It is an appendix out of the state management plan that lists the species that are at the most severe or and moderate. Wait, how do they place it? This committee ranked the invasive species as how big a threat they are. And so when you're looking at these lists, there's so many, it's very overwhelming. And some of that's just the nature of change in the ecosystems. But this list tells you, say, for example, all of the foraging carps are considered severe and invading. There are some that are severe but not in the state yet. There are some that are severe and established here, like zebra mussels. So this is a really nice one-pager that has all the aquatic plants or animals and all but like a couple aquatic plants I left off. Keep it all on one page, but the key ones are on here. So this is another resource you have as you do your investigation. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I would like you to group yourselves into groups of 4. Ready? Oh, and bring your notebook and something to write with. Ready? Go. What tonight? You've been sponges and you've been sucking up a ton, and then we're going to wrap up in just a little bit of time. So that's always a challenge. But I want to preface this by saying this. I structure this to be an intro, a very broad base, not to overwhelm you, but to give you a broad introduction to this, like a 101 class, so that you know some of the big categories within invasive species, especially aquatic, so that you know where to get some more information, where to get resources, what some of the issues and themes are between different species, the challenges, the origins, all of those pieces. So what I would like to do is to do a very short report out between our 4 groups of your 5-minute conversation. And I didn't ask anyone, I didn't prep you for that, so don't worry if it's not, formal or succinct. Well, it doesn't even be succinct. But what I would like to do is to just hear from each group a few things that came to the top for the conversation. Things that really sparked the whole group, if you had those.
Are we
So, yeah, I want to do something before I write me out. It might be part of that, but I want to.
So we are.
All right, who is willing to start us off? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I don't see your name tag. Jackie. Jackie, I didn't bring it. No, it's okay. I call everybody ma'am, but then when I get called ma'am for real, I'm like, what? Well, but that's like I say, hey kids to adults, and coming from me, I think, oh, that's funny. And then like the punk at the gas station calls me ma'am, and I'm like, what? No. So anyway, go ahead. Share. I'm sorry.
No worries. There was like, I guess, commonalities that was, well, I did the origins and spread in these species of where they came from and where they're spread to, and also in treatment and prevention, I guess. Anything else? But, like the commonalities, I guess, though they were varied species.
Mm-hmm.
That was.
So you saw common threads between a lot of them?
Like, especially like origins and stuff.
There are some very, a few key places where a lot of them at least originated.
How far they can travel too.
Yeah. Thank you. Another group.
Our
Yes.
group can go next. So we only got to talk about 4 of them, but I think all of the 4 we talked about were prohibited, and that was something that they had in common. But the one that stuck the most with us was the sea lamprey, because we were just really grossed out and kind of creeped out. Because I was like, what if it attaches to me, and then I just what do I do? And they're like this long, and I have a giant sea lamprey on my arm. I don't know. Yeah, but did you look at the teeth?
They're about that long.
They take think of like one of those remoras or whatever, sharks.
Right,
It takes
right.
a while for them to attach. I don't think I've not heard
And, like,
about any on people.
Do they live on the bottom of the water, or like you're just swimming along and oh my gosh, sea lamprey?
Sea lampreys are kind of a Duluth or a Lake Superior one.
I swim in Lake Superior.
Really? For long periods of time?
For
a
like
dry
weeks at a time. Anyway, that's what
one
we
thing,
got us.
just because you brought up sea lamprey, we have a lot of native lamprey that anglers will bring in to DNR people and go, look, I killed all these. And they're like, oops.
Oh.
You can fish for them because they're regulated and they're supposed to be yummy. So that's very different than that's quite the problem. Okay, so thank you. Anything else anyone on this group wants to add?
I don't know.
That rose to the surface, no pun intended. Okay, that's fine. Is there something that stood out for this group?
Well, there's like outliers in each category, but for the most part, you could sum it up by they come from Europe. We brought them here. There's not much you can do about them once they take hold. Prevention's the best. Yeah, prevention's the best cure, and they mostly outcompete is how they have their advantage.
Yeah, that's a really good generic summary for invasives.
We were all, I think, surprised to learn that Eurasian milfoil can be relatively benign in some situations.
Yeah, and actually the healthier, the more robust an ecosystem, the less chance of a lot of these have of taking hold. So there are some places, there are some lakes that could have zebra mussels and not be a disaster compared to some.
Oh, so that holds true for everything.
Specifically with zebra mussels, how would that happen? I mean, what is it about a healthy lake, let's say, that would compete favorably against that zebra mussel?
I'm trying to think of a good example. I've heard I've discussed this with some colleagues.
Yeah.
The only example I'm thinking right now is the river. So right now, this year, the St. Croix all of a sudden magically looks like got rid of its zebra mussels from last year. And I'm hopeful, but I'm not expecting that it's permanently gone. But we have had really high water years, so they've been flushed downstream. So, that's
good news, bad news. Really.
Yeah, but if they eventually flush down to the ocean, they keep flushing down there, they won't live in salt water. Very well. Wait a minute. No, they're freshwater only. Yeah. No, I was just trying to think because I'm from salty inland seas are just kind of salty. But yeah, those are really good summaries. How about this group? Anything that really came to the top?
One thing as far as the origin, a lot of them came over in ship battles.
Yes,
just
a lot of
accidentally.
Yes.
That way.
I'm sorry, I'm walking. I am listening to you.
Unintentionally, but a lot of them were also brought over intentionally.
Yes. There's a real mix of that. And I know somebody at the beginning on our list was, on our wants list, want to know, was about surfacing of boats and keeping them from coming across from overseas that way. There's a lot more regulation, and ballast water doesn't mean nothing gets in that way, but it's the Pollution Control Agency in Minnesota is the one that covers ballast water on the large ships, but then beyond the Minnesota boundaries, you're talking multi-state, international waters, so it gets a lot more complex. My understanding of that piece is very shallow at this point, but there's progress in that. The surfacing of boats piece, actually, you can coat, and not so much and not at all for ballast water, but there's some ships or some boats in Minnetonka that have I can't remember what kind of metal coat on the bottom, makes them really heavy, but it's resistant. It gives off zinc. I think it might be zinc, and it gives off almost like bug spray, like a little oar around them where they won't attach. I don't know the pros and cons. Well, I know some of the pros of that. I don't know the cons, but it's an expensive process. Most people aren't going to have their little Lund fishing boat, zinc or whatever coated. I want to merge into some of what we have learned as a full group. Now, you've just shouted out a bunch of things you've learned tonight, but grab your notebooks for this part. If you don't have them, grab them. I want you to jot this down. Matter of fact, let's start with a quick write for yourself before we extroverts take over and start talking at the rest of you. So let's do a minute or two. I want you to write down. I'm not going to really identify, or I'm not going to pigeonhole you. Write down some of the key points you learned or the key things that you learned through the exercises we've done tonight first.
Legislators are concerned about this issue.
Yeah. And on both sides of the aisle. And funding it. Which is a rare thing these days on both fronts.
On that vein, the regulatory bodies are proactive, or even on the ones that are on the list of
And actually, yeah, Minnesota is one of the first in aquatic invasive species of doing stuff, largely because of one man that just retired from the DNR, Jay Rendell, powerhouse of a very precise man, kept us ahead of most states. Other learned things tonight.
For many AIS, it's very similar means of spread as well as methods of prevention. So
Yep.
do the same thing and do for multiple AIS.
Yep. Similar means of spread and prevention, which is actually a little reassuring to me because it means, oh, we might be able to do some similar things and you know, contain a bunch of it. Other things you learned.
Awareness is key. There's a lot more facts, but few common ones that we all know.
Yeah. I'm gonna add that.
Many species. The value of interactive, like the game. We were talking about when we came in about how that really demonstrates how fast invasion takes over.
Yeah, not just PowerPoint and lecture. I've done more than I like to do usually tonight with you. Sorry. But yeah, the value of that is huge in your education and outreach. Other things you learn.
Okay, so another one that's surprising, you can become a volunteer inspector, I like that.
Yeah.
So I guess there's.
You can become a volunteer inspector. There are volunteer inspector rules.
So the fact that you can partner, or there's partnerships with the community and associations can go a long way in management and control.
Volunteer. Very active. Incredible. Yeah, you guys are in a good part of the metro for a lot of very knowledgeable and active people. I would recommend Gabe Jabor, who's not as an education contact, but as a guy who knows everybody, who's doing everything. He's what marina is he? He's the big marina owner, anyway. Wealthy man, very passionate, very well connected, and will get the whole community to actually listen. Other things you learn. We'll take a couple more before I wrap up.
Well, I learned about the banded mystery snail. I guess I didn't
Oh,
know
yeah.
about that before.
Yeah.
And one reason why I did it is because I've actually found a couple of those snails and kind of looked at them.
Okay, so particular species, yeah. There are a lot of native snails here too, but it can be tricky to identify them. I'm not an expert, but yeah, they're everywhere, the big ones. And they're not the rusty crayfish, Peggy. They're nasty.
Are there snails that look like the zebra mussels? Or
No.
mussels that look like that? No.
No,
So you
mussels and
couldn't really
snails,
misidentified.
shape-wise, are so different. Just think curlicue versus clam.
I mean, are there other mussels that mussels that look like zebra mussels?
Oh, on the native mussels, we've got a really robust set of mussels in Minnesota. 40 some, but none of them are striped like that.
Okay.
And I didn't get into a lot of biology because I wanted you to kind of explore. But this one's a really cool one. All of our native mussels attach to sandy bottom shores or not hard objects. They don't attach like a zebra mussel attaches much more like a ocean mussel. They have byssal threads. They're little threads that come out of the edge, and think of like an ivy vine. They attach on, and that's part of what makes them so successful, is they can attach to every hard surface, including plant stems, including native mussels, so there's so many on them they can't open and they die. Yeah, so that's one of their survival tactics. It's amazing.
And if you guys would like, when we get together again in October, I can bring from the DNR the giant mussel display that we have that has a bunch of them laid out.
The native one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been
that's-
around the state a number of times already, so I'm sure Bernard
Yeah.
can take it.
Oh, sure. That's fabulous.
So I'll bring that with me.
Yes.
Again, so you guys can see it.
I should have brought this up earlier. Just, regarding invasives in general. What is your opinion about
Thank you.
the thought that sometimes it becomes almost like a stereotype and almost a scare thing where maybe lake owner associations use it as a way of controlling access to
Oh,
their lake?
definitely. Actually, Minnetonka is a really good example. No, Minnetonka's a really good example where they want to just they would like to shut up public access. And the DNR said, no, we're not doing that. We're in the business of keeping public accesses open because the water belongs to the public. I understand that it's a pain that your lake is the one where a bunch of yahoos might come and not pay attention and bring stuff. I mean, I totally get that. But it doesn't change the fact that it's public water, and we can't shut it down. And it's not like Meade, where there's one lake pretty much, or 4 lakes in that state, where you can police every person that goes in and out. 10,000, 11,000, and 11,500 lakes in the state, not going to happen.
Or like Christmas Lake,
Yes.
out there, they're talking about having one inspection site for the whole county or for a certain part of the county. That would be a huge, hardship if somebody wanted to go over there.
Yes, it would. And there's a lot of meetings in my office about things like that.
So did they ever talk about trying to pass legislation that they do basic education in elementary school or something, make it part of the
Oh my God, that's a whole nother
Don't get me started.
Okay. Yeah, you can talk to Peggy
There is
about
a
that.
statute in Minnesota law.
Yes, there is.
That says there will be environmental education. It is law that there be environmental education in the state of Minnesota. What part of the statute, what section of law do you think that is in? Seems like there should be an education. No, it's a solid waste.
Solid waste.
regulations.
Oh my God! Because it came from the Office of Environmental Assistance, previously Office of Waste Management, now part of the BCA.
So
Anyway,
there
that's
is
a whole
statute
other story.
That there must be environmental education, but it is not in the education.
The science standards right now do have a thing about invasive species, because when I was doing Project WET and the new standards came out, there were a bunch of teachers like, oh, invasive species, do you have anything? And I'm like, well, I got one activity. So.
Apparently there's some kind of an exhibit over at the Science Museum, because I would guess she was about 9 years old, came by the boat launch today and started pontificating for her friends about how that zebra mussel wasn't supposed to be there because nothing else would eat it and everything. I thought, there you go.
Awesome. Good job. Yeah, come to the DNR booth or building this year at the State Fair. The whole end that used to be a shooting gallery is invasive species now. And they're going to have a boat set up with fake plants on it so you can go through and try and identify, find them. Okay, I know I've gone over time. Well, I've gone 5 past where I wanted to go. Sorry. There are also some things I would venture to guess off the want to learn that we could shift to the learn. Not thoroughly, but we have discussed a number of these. We have discussed, we did not talk about your economic impact on Genie. That's a good one.
Can I say one thing about that?
Yeah.
Big subject. The Friends of the Mississippi River
Yes.
have done a very, very thorough analysis of what it would cost the state of Minnesota if Asian carp get up through the Ford Lock to the upper river.
Yeah.
So they have made the economic case for closing the upper and lower St.
Yes.
And I believe that information is on their website. If
Yes.
it's not on their website, you can get it through the Friends of the Mississippi River.
And there are other really good economic studies that have been done. It's just this is a whole nother talk.
There's an article in
So
today's
there's plenty.
paper.
Why is there no environmental education?
But I hope that you're able to find a few glimpses of things you could do, people or resources you could find if you're going to be doing more work with this. And you can always contact me if you're not quite sure, and I'd be happy to get you to the right person or the right program. So before I hand this back to Peggy to do a couple bits of logistics before you guys go home for the night, thank you. You're a fantastic group. It was really fun to spend the evening with you.
Thank you. Thank you, April. Always a pleasure. All right, real quick. They're gonna boot us out of here because we, of course, have a terrible reputation for hanging around, walking the talk, solve problems, make the world a better place. So I will stay afterwards if you want to chat outside. But one question to you right now. Who in this room has had a neighbor say, I would like a neighbor? In the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
In the watershed district?
I don't know if they're my neighbor.
Okay. We may need you to, can you stay just a couple of minutes and chat?
She wants you.
So this may help you get off square one. So if you would stay just a couple minutes. What other quick questions do you have before they toss us out? What other burning questions have come up? Joe?
Mine isn't so much of a question. Well, it is. Why aren't human beings on the invasive species? They fit all the criteria.
If you talk to at the right level with the right people,
they say
just don't talk government on that. Yeah. We don't regulate. Well, yeah, we do.
I looked for like 3 hours a day on the computer looking for an article on it. Because that's what I
Did you
wanted
find
to do.
something?
The only thing I found is there's an organization in Richfield, and they talked about the ramifications of population in Minnesota, and they did it.
Let me give you a person to talk to about that. If you're interested, talk to Karen Schrag.
I was just going to say Karen Schrag.
SHRAGG. She's the chief naturalist at Wood Lake Nature Center.
Oh, she's got population.
Population.
Yeah.
She knows
Population balance.
She will give you all the resources you want about
Oh,
that.
yes. And she's
SHRAGG.
yes. Yep.
She was on the video.
She's very, very powerful.
I just saw her.
She was at the
Deirdre.
naturalists.
Before you
really good volunteer opportunities that will be on the web. One's already on the web at the State Fair in the Eco Experience Building. The other one is with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. I'll put that up tonight. And those are coming up soon here. And then if you haven't given me give me your sheets as you walk out the door. And then if you haven't given me your other forms that I gave you during your interviews, give those to me as well. And please take as many of these handouts as you can.
Grab those handouts because we're going to pack them up and take
Give them out to your neighbors on Tuesday night. I don't want to take them home with me, so.